I believe the biggest problem in the world is that people don't understand themselves enough. This show is designed to help you understand your INFJ personality, heal from your past, and create a life that you love. I'm Sarah Kuhn, and this is the Quiet Ones podcast. One of the things that I struggle with the most is a lack of self-love and confidence. Some people call it self-love deficiency disorder. I've spent a lot of time working on this, and I want to share what I've learned with you just in case you struggle with the same thing. On this Thursday episode of the Quiet Ones podcast, we're talking all about confidence. Let's take a listen. We're going to talk about how to have more empathy. That was one of the questions that I got. So I wanted to start first with what empathy means, because I think a lot of people don't know, and I wasn't really like 100% certain. A lot of people talk about sympathy, right? And sympathy comes from a Greek word that has the same origin as empathy. Sympathy means together. So it's basically knowing somebody else's feelings because you've been through the same thing, right? So you know what they're feeling like because you've been through the same thing. Maybe somebody's father passed away and your father has passed away, so then you know what they're feeling like because you've been through that. Maybe somebody got laid off from a job or fired from their job, and you're like, I've been there because I've felt that. I've been fired, so I know what you feel like. I know how devastating that is. Empathy is very similar, but empathy is imagining somebody else's feelings, so putting yourself into their feelings without actually having been through what they're going through, right? So like maybe you haven't been fired, but one of your friends was fired recently, and you think about the effects that it would have on your life if you were fired. And you think about it in such a way that you think about all of the details of what that feels like. You think about all of the pain, and maybe you relate to it in a different way. Maybe you were laid off, or maybe you quit a job unexpectedly, right? So something similar happened to you, and you can say, oh, I kind of feel the same way because I've sort of been in that situation. But mostly it's just imagining what they're going through and saying, I can relate to how you're feeling, and I want to help you with what you're going through. For INFJs, empathy comes very, very naturally to us, right? Because we have our second function, which is something that we use very well and very naturally. It's extroverted feeling. So we focus on how other people feel more than we focus on how we ourselves feel. And that is basically what empathy is. It's being concerned about how other people feel and being able to relate to them. So because we're so in tune with how other people are feeling, then empathy comes very naturally for us, right? We want them to feel comfortable, even if it makes us uncomfortable. Another part of that is intuition. Because our intuition is so strong, that also helps us to uncover how they're feeling, and then what's the best way to help them, what's the best way to relate to them. And I think another part of it that's really, really important is we spend a lot of time thinking about different scenarios, different situations in our head, and we like to explore how other people feel so that we can better relate to them. And then when that sort of thing comes up in real life, then you know what to do, you know how to help. Because it comes so naturally for us, I think how to have more empathy, a lot of it comes with age, really. And I know that's probably not something that you want to hear, especially if you're younger, in your teens or early 20s or early 30s. Because when I was that age, I was like, oh, that's a ridiculous answer. Like, I don't want to hear that. That's not true. But now that I'm like mid 30s, I realize that's true. The last 3 or 4 years have been like this massive awakening for me. I've realized that a lot of the stuff that I was told when I was young was actually true, and it's kind of like, ugh, I don't want that to be true. Like, I thought I was right. I don't want to learn that I'm wrong. Um, but I think part of empathy comes from having shared experiences, which, isn't exactly empathy, right? That's more like sympathy. But the more that you experience in life, the more that you're going to be able to relate to people, right? And the more people that you've been around, the more difficult circumstances that you've been through, the more times that you've had to admit that you're wrong. I mean, a lot of these things, they're all like character building experiences that you go through. And the first time that you go through something, it's kind of like, the first time that you learn how to drive, or the first time that you learn how to walk. I mean, most of us don't remember that, right? But you've probably seen other kids learning how to walk, and it's like you're not good at it when you first start, right? When you first started driving a car, you probably weren't great at it. It took me forever to learn how to drive because I didn't want to drive. I thought it was horrifying, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why do I have to do this? And of course, I knew that, obviously it's important. When I was learning how to drive too, we lived 45 minutes outside of town. So literally like 50 miles. So of course it was important for me. It wasn't like I could just walk down the street to where I needed to go. But I still hated it, and I didn't want to do it because it was really difficult for me. I remember like all the details, like my ankle hurt because I wasn't used to like pushing on the brakes and the gas pedals. I remember feeling so super anxious and like having these arguments with my dad because when he was teaching me how to drive, he was like, okay, you need to slow down to turning speed. And I'm like, what is turning speed? Like, how do I know what that is? Where's the definition for that? Is that like 25 or is that like 45 miles per hour? And he's like, well, I don't know, try 45 and see what happens. And I'm like, that's not a good answer. No, we're gonna like end up in a ditch or something. I mean, I don't want to do that. Like, why don't you just tell me what turning speed is? And he's like, I don't know, start with 25 and see how it works. And I'm like, this is terrible. I want to know all of the little details. I don't want to have to experience all of this stuff by myself. But once you go through that experience, right, then it's easier to be able to relate to people, not only who are learning how to drive, but who are going through other difficult experiences that are intricate and detailed and confusing and overwhelming, um and then you also remember how you went through that experience, right? You remember that it was difficult. You remember all the arguments that you had. Like, I had arguments with my parents. They basically had to force me to drive. It got to the point where my mom would be like bribing me, like, like, do you want to go out to eat? And I would be like, oh yeah, of course. And she's like, okay, cool, you have to drive. And I'm like, oh, nope, not hungry anymore. Um, but eventually I did learn how to drive, and then it got even worse because like right when I started to learn how to drive, I got in like by myself. I got into a really bad accident. And then I was like, no, I really don't want to drive. And of course my parents did the right thing and told me like, no, you really need to go learn how to drive, because if you don't, then you're never going to do it. And just going through that whole process is like every time there's somebody now that's struggling with a big process, maybe they're not learning how to drive, maybe they're learning how to do live videos, maybe they're starting a new job, maybe they're moving across the country. It's a big process that's full of these intricate little details, and it's scary and overwhelming. And so for me, I think about my experience in the past and go, oh, I know how that feels. I can relate to the feelings that you're feeling, even though it's not the same situation. So when you're thinking about how to have more empathy, a lot of it comes from thinking about how other people are feeling, thinking about what they're going through. A big part of that too can be understanding different personality types, not just your own personality type, but other people's personality type, right? So I know that we spend a lot of time focusing on what is an INFJ, how do we feel, how do we think, how do we make decisions, how do we organize our lives, right? And that's good because it's important for you to understand yourself. But it's also important for you to understand other people. It's important for you to understand, especially like the people that you spend the most time around, whether it's your parents or your significant other, your teachers, your boss, whoever it is, your friends. It's important for you to understand how they organize their lives too, and how they make decisions, how they think about things, how they like to communicate too, right? When I was growing up, my parents always told me, you are too direct. It's rude and it's mean, and you need to stop being so direct. People don't like that. And people aren't going to like you because you're so direct. And so I took that as like I'm wrong. It's not okay for me to be direct. And so then like I didn't want to talk to people because I was like, I don't know how to talk to people. All I know is how to be direct, right? That's what comes to me very naturally. I'm very honest and very open. And so they know that like if they ask me a question, they're going to get a direct and honest answer. And it took me a long time to realize, I mean, this seems like so duh right now, but back then I just accepted everything that my parents said without questioning it or thinking it through. But once I started learning about personality types, I realized the reason that my parents told me that I shouldn't be direct is because they're not direct and they don't like to be direct and they see it as being rude. But that doesn't mean that I'm wrong for being direct. It means that they're not okay with me being direct. But it's okay for me to be direct in general. Another thing that I realized too is that, especially in the United States, I'm sure it's like this in other countries, but certain parts of the country have different, almost like personalities. Like it's acceptable for people to act a certain way in different parts of the country. So where I grew up in the Midwest, most people are generally friendly and personable, right? So if you're not that way, if you're quiet and introverted, then they see you as being rude. Then I moved to the South. I lived in North Carolina for about 6 years. People in the South have this persona of being very friendly and open. They call it Southern hospitality, right? Because it's very welcoming. They want everybody to feel included and like they're a part of a big family. If you're shy and quiet and direct, then you're considered incredibly rude, right? So obviously that didn't work out for me very well. And so then I decided to move to Boston, which is in the northeastern part of the United States. And my parents and my friends and, family were going, you don't want to do that. People in Boston are rude. Like, you're not going to like it there. People are so rude there. And my first thought was, why do you think that they're rude? Like, what makes them rude? So I ended up moving to Boston. And I realized that the reason that it's generally perceived that people in the Northeast are rude is because they are direct and they're honest and they're straightforward. And I was like, that's me. I'm direct and honest and straightforward. Like, these are my people. I know how to be that way. That's how I naturally am. And while sometimes it's difficult for me to accept other people being that way to me, right? Because it's totally fine for me to be direct, but it's not so fine for other people to be direct. People don't tell me that I'm rude here. They just accept that that's how I am because that's how everybody is. It's normal to be that way, right? So a lot of it comes from understanding the people that you're around, right? When you start to understand other people's personalities, then you can have a lot more empathy because you come at them with understanding rather than just with your personal experience. I'll tell you another story too. I went to a couple of concerts. Well, I went to one concert actually with one of my friends, and I didn't really know her very well. I knew her on Instagram for several years, but I hadn't really spent a lot of time in person with her. And so I didn't really know what to expect. And then we go to the concert, and she didn't want to go to the concert too early. She wanted to be there before the show started, but not like when the gates opened. And then she knew so many people. So she spent the whole time like, oh, I need to go talk to that person. And oh, I need to go say hi to this person. And just like going all these different directions. And, my first instinct is, God, that's rude. But then my second thought was, wait a second. She's just different than I am. And it's not really that she's being rude. It's just that she's super friendly. She's an extrovert and I'm not an extrovert. And she has tons of friends, but I don't have tons of friends. And that's okay. She's just different than I am. That doesn't make her wrong. It doesn't make her rude. She's just different than I am. Then after the show, she wanted to hang out and talk to a bunch of people, right? And I was like, I want to go. Like, I'm tapped out. My energy is gone. I need to go and rest and recover. And she was like, no, let's go talk to people. Like, let's go out to a karaoke bar. And I'm like, at midnight? Do you know that it's almost midnight? And she's like, yeah, let's go hang out. And I'm like, no. So I was talking to one of my other friends. She wants to come to a concert with me because we both like the same group, and they're getting ready to announce a tour. So we're like planning buying tickets. And I'm like, okay, so I understand that you want to go to a concert together. That's super cool. But I need to know like details. How do you do concerts? And she's like, oh, I have to be like first in line right when the doors open so that I can buy my merchandise and buy me a glass of water and then sit down and wait for the concert to start. Like, I don't want to be late. And then as soon as the concert is over, we need to go and go home. And I'm like, thank you. That is exactly what I need. We can go to concerts together because we do concerts the same way. So a lot of it comes from, understanding other people, right? Once you understand their personality, you understand how they react to situations, how they process information, then you can have a lot more empathy. You can show up with more understanding for them because you know how they are and you know what to expect, right? One more example. So my niece is an INTP, right? And that means that she has a perceiving personality type, so she's not great at making decisions. She doesn't want to narrow things down to one decision. She wants to keep her options open and have all of the decisions. And the more decisions that she has available, like the more options, the better she feels, right? So if you have to narrow it down to one option, then that's a problem. So I've told this story a lot, but it's true. We used to go out to eat together and we would go like as a family. And so there would be a few people there. And, we go to a restaurant, sometimes a new restaurant, and everybody would be looking at the menu, right? And the server comes over and they're like, what do you want? And most everybody knows what they want. And my niece is sitting there like panicking. She can't decide what she wants. And it turns into this argument with everybody because it's like, just decide, like, we're hungry, we want to eat. What are you doing? Why is it so difficult for you to figure out what you want to eat? Right? And then she would get angry and upset, and then she would almost be like crying because this has turned into this like drama thing of just picking what you want to eat. It's, like, why is that so difficult? So I was talking to her about it later, and I was like, let's figure this out. Like, what's going on here? Why is it so difficult for you to figure out what you want to eat? And so we started talking about the decision-making process, like how you decide what you want to eat. And she's like, well, what if there are 5 things on the menu that I want and I pick one and then I miss out on all the other things? And like, what if the one that I pick isn't good and then I'll be disappointed? And she had all these great points about like why she couldn't make a decision that I had never even thought about. I just think about how I make decisions, right? Which is, ooh, that looks good. That's what I want. This is better than everything else. That's definitely what I want. But the way that she makes decisions is totally different than my thought process. And I don't think that a lot of people take time especially in that kind of situations, most people would be like, just pick something. Like, you're holding up the show. What is wrong with you? You know, they go straight to like this accusatory thing because they're aggravated and they're frustrated and maybe they're hungry, which makes them even more irritable, right? They never take the time to say, why are you having trouble making a decision? How is this process? Like, what does it look like for you? What thoughts are you thinking? Why are you worried about making the wrong decision? So what we did once we figured out how she makes decisions, because she didn't even know how she makes decisions, right? A lot of times we don't know ourselves how we make decisions. But once we talked about it and we figured out, okay, this is why you can't make a decision, because you like all the options and you don't want to narrow it down and you're worried that you're going to miss out on something else. So let's figure out how to make that decision. What can we do that would make it easier for you to make this decision? Do you need more time to think about it? Would it be better if you had the menu in front of you a few days before we go out to eat? Because you can access menus to restaurants online, right? So we can pick out where we're going to eat a couple of days ahead of time and then have you look at the menu so that you know exactly what you're going to order when you go in there. So we don't have this panic issue, right? We don't have people getting angry and mad. You already know what you want. Another thing that we did is I told her, like, every time I go to a certain restaurant, I already know what I want. I eat at Panera all the time. I order the same thing. There's a Chinese food restaurant here that I like. I always order the same thing because it's good and I know it's good and I like it and that's why I go there. And so she decided she was going to do the same thing, that she picks out what she likes and she knows that that's what she's going to order. And she was comfortable with that decision, and it made her feel a lot less panicky because she had a solution, right? And a lot of our problems, especially with decision making, come from overthinking, right? We think that we're going to miss out on something if we choose the wrong decision. And generally, as INFJs, we don't run into this problem in small decisions. It's usually in the bigger decisions that we run into this problem with. But here's the thing. All you have to do is make a decision. And 9 times out of 10, probably 99 times out of 100, it doesn't matter what decision you make. I know that's really like difficult to accept in the beginning because it's like, no, it does matter. It matters what college I go to. It matters what major I have. It matters where I live. It doesn't matter. In the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. All that matters to get out of the overthinking is that you make a decision. And then the next thing is that you make it the right decision. So you stop questioning yourself. You stop worrying about whether it's the right decision or not. You pick something and you tell yourself, this is the right decision. This is what we're doing, nothing else. We're not going to overthink anymore. We're going to commit to this decision and we're going to make it the right decision. It will solve so many of your overthinking problems. So many problems. And I mean, for me, it's been like this life-changing thing. I've done it in the past a few times. Things like when I moved to Boston, I was back and forth because I could have moved whenever I wanted to, wherever I wanted to, right? I mean, I didn't have a lot of money, but there was nothing that was tying me down to living in Missouri. There was nothing there. Like, my family was there, but they were planning on moving. And I don't have a husband. I don't have any kids. I really didn't have a great job. So I was like, I can move wherever I want to, right? So where do I want to move? And then you're like, ugh, the decisions, like anywhere in the United States, but like where? So I picked Boston because of some random thing. And I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And everybody was like, that's a terrible decision. You're not going to like it. It's cold there. People are rude. Like, it's super expensive. And I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I made a decision. That's it. And then came the people telling me, you're never going to get hired there. You're never going to be able to afford it. You're not going to like it. You're not going to make it. Like, it got even worse. And that for me solidified my decision of I am going to make it. I will show you that I will make it work. So the more that people told me it wasn't going to work, the more committed to the decision I became. It's always that way with me. I don't know why, but the more people tell me you're doing it wrong, it's not going to work, you don't know what you're doing, the more committed that I become, and the more that it's like, oh, I am going to do it. I wasn't going to do it. I was like teeter-tottering before, but now I am going to do it. I'm going to do it twice and take pictures, and you're going to see that I can make it work. That's how it is in my head. One of the comments says, I like your confidence. I love that. I thank you so much for that. One of my biggest problems for the majority of my life is that I haven't had enough confidence. And I've been doing so much self-work over the last 3 or 4 years that it's astonishing to me that people see that there's a big change in my confidence. One of my friends this morning, I was just texting her and she said, "You're fearless." And I was like, what? Does that describe me? Does it seem like I'm fearless? Because I mean, I think I have stepped into a lot more confidence than what I was 5 or 6 years ago, for sure. 5 or 6 years ago was like one of the lowest points of my life. I didn't think that I was worth anything, and I would have never found myself on a live video in front of a camera putting myself out there like I do now. So there's been this massive change. And the reason that I do a lot of this is because I want to help you guys. I want to help all of you that are having those same kind of problems that I had. If you don't have enough confidence, if there's some big change that you want to make in your life, if you want to move across the country, or you want to start a new career, or maybe you want to start your own business, maybe you just want to start a blog. I want to help you to be able to do that. I've done all of that stuff and I know how to tap into the confidence, even if you feel like you don't have any. Even if maybe you're like me. When I was growing up, my mom used to tell me, you just need to have more confidence. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I need. How do I get that? And she was like, I don't know. I've never had that problem. And I was like, well, that doesn't help me, right? Like, I don't have any confidence, but I need to have some, and you can't help me? And she was like, I have no idea. Like, I've never had that problem, so I don't even know where to start to look. So I've literally spent like 10, 15 years searching for confidence, and over the past 5 to 6 years, I've really tapped into it quite a bit. And the last 3 years, I mean, have been huge. Even a year ago would have been really difficult for me to sit in front of a live camera and just talk about it. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate every single one of you. Please make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already, and leave a review wherever you listen to the podcast. It helps other people to be able to find us. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you again next week. Hi there! I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. Please consider subscribing to my channel. I'm working very hard to produce content that will help you, and I really, really appreciate your support. Also, if you want some more inspiration, check out this video right here.